Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I am Poonam Chawla, and this is the Remote Workforce Summit 2021. This virtual event is sponsored by Nutanix, AWS, Bspin Global, Google Cloud, Cisco, Help AG, SAP Concur, Software AG, and Alcatel Lucent. The pandemic has caused a massive disruption to the global workforce and has made many of us rethink how, where, and why we work. Large swathes of employees are working remotely around the world. As the world's largest work from home experiment continues, we convene thought leaders to discuss how to inspire employees, create meaningful connections, and make work from home work for everyone. Today, we are joined by Mr. Tiago Costa, Chief Operating Officer, Dulsco. As the CEO of People and Outsourced Staffing Solutions at Dulsco, Tiago Costa is leading all aspects of outsourcing business, permanent placement, and major tenders at Dulsco. With a degree in clinical psychology, a master's degree in clinical neuropsychology, and a wealth of experience in professional staffing, Tiago took a leadership role with global flagship names such as Edico, Hayes, Faircroft, both in Europe and in the GCC. It is worth mentioning that Dulsco is a homegrown Emirati organization with 86 years in the manpower business and over 11,000 staff operating across the UAE. Dulsco is also at the forefront of environment solutions business and is the official waste management partner for Expo 2020 Dubai. Hi, Tiago. Thanks for joining in today.
Good afternoon, Pune. Thank you so much for the invite. It's definitely a pleasure to be here today speaking with you.
So we are gonna, when we were discussing off the, record, we were having some interesting conversations and, we were talking about, remote work has created a lot of challenges, for us. We are working remotely. There are a lot of things when we are working together, we can easily collaborate. We can easily talk about it. We can keep track of where everyone is at and, what are the difficulties they are facing and all. But leading remote teams is extremely hard. It's not because our teams suck, but it's because we are leading our teams remotely and it's very difficult to understand, what are the challenges they are facing and all. So without further ado, how can leaders like yourself motivate employees to see more positive effects on their daily work? Are they more engaged or have a more stronger sense of well-being?
There is a good question. I would say most of all with a lot of agility and flexibility into place. I think the definition of work itself changed a little bit. Before, people used to say, "I'm going to work," so they would commute. I think that's something that work is something that we do as opposed to a place that we commute to and from. So I think the definition of work itself, especially since unfortunately the last year and something, at the moment shifted a little bit. So I think that's one of the things that usually managers or leaders tend to confuse is being present and being productive. Two different things. The fact that the person is present in the office and you can see, it doesn't mean that he's being productive. So I think that one of the things that for us changed and on my personal experience changed with teams is, when you used to pass by someone in the hallway and you ask, "Hey, how are you?" I think during the last year, it became a little bit more an actual question that you're interested to hear the answer. So because we started to having virtual meetings in Teams or in Zoom or Skype or whatever it is, and considering that everyone was battling the same situations, you started to ask, "How are you?" But really, how are you? How is your family? How are you dealing with this situation? I think the fact that happens in some way helped to bring teams a little bit closer and people a little bit closer, regardless of if it's your boss or your team leader or whatever it is. I think people engaged a little bit more. I think it helped to create what for me is fundamental to be able to manage teams on a remote way, which is it fomented a positive culture. So for you to manage teams remotely, some things are obvious that you need. You obviously need the automation tools. To have the automation tools, you need a process that is compliant to what you need to do. So compliance is obviously definitely important. And compliance needs to be directly connected with the automation that allows you to move forward. Then you need to set clear expectations. If you do not set expectations to your remote teams, sometimes people get a little bit lost on what is the daily task, what they need to do on that week, what they need to achieve, especially if we're talking about entry to mid-level roles that are less needed that are more needed to have not a micromanagement but a closer approach. So that's extremely important. And then the most important part for me is trust. If you do not trust your teams, and if your teams do not trust you, because sometimes we forget that it's not only about the manager trusting the team needs to trust the manager, needs to understand the whys behind of what they are doing. So trust for me is a fundamental part of being able to manage correctly a remote workforce or a hybrid workforce, which is the most, I would say, common case, and what is going to move a little bit more towards the future is hybrid workforces, not only in the office, not only remote working, but in a hybrid model.
No, you've rightly said that trust is the most fundamental part. But you know what happens is when we are working remotely, from a leadership perspective, we have seen that we do trust our employees and all. But there is so much of we all are working under so much of pressure, and especially when you're working remotely, there are different challenges which are there, and sometimes it's the collaboration, sometimes it's the productively we seeking the answers to that. So from a leadership perspective, even though work from home, we have seen, as per even the recent study by Harvard Business Review also had, they have also done some interesting study, and they have said people who work from office, away from office, they are able to perform much better than people who are working in office. But what we forgot to realize that is when working from home, you are only concentrated towards one particular task. Whereas when we are working in office, we are collaborating with different teams and we are working on multiple tasks. So in your view, more specifically from a leadership perspective, how do you see the greater oversight of regulatory compliance? We are talking about trust, we are talking about automation tools, but how do you implement the regulatory compliance, which is a big challenge, logging in at the right time, logging out, and all those things? So how do you manage those?
I would say, funny enough, it's quite similar to when you need to go to the office. So when you need to go to the office, usually you log in or arrive to your desk at, depending on the time of the office, obviously at 8, 8:30, 9, whatever the timing is. I would say with the remote working, happens in quite a similar way. So the fact that obviously we're talking about, if we think about different roles with different tasks have different needs. But again, the compliant part of working from home is directly connected with the automation that was created to allow the person to continue to do the tasks and to continue to do the work that was doing before. So it shouldn't change the tasks themselves. Sometimes the fact that you're working remotely, they became more automated because reality is most of the companies had to pretty much enhance their current platforms or tools to take away some of the, let's call it, routine tasks that were filling your day and needed paper, physical signatures, a conversation with someone on the office next door that you have to walk there instead of picking up the phone and having the conversation because you need to show the paper. So all of these small things were enhanced by most of the companies to pretty much being excluded and allowing people to focus on what they need to focus. So when you're working remotely and you have in your day X amount of meetings that you need to attend, actually, one of the things that is started to happen a little bit more is you start to feel that you have more available space in your agenda to have more meetings because you do not have to commute. And mostly because in some of those meetings, strangely enough, the fact that you're not face to face, you can, in a more easy way, to disconnect of the meeting than when you're face to face. So there is a psychological.
Don't you think that it becomes more transactional when you are disconnecting in a meeting rather than, it's just like, just because it's a remote meeting, I become more transactional. I say, okay, fine, X, Y, Z, and we are like,
Yeah, I think there is a psychological effect on it, which is the nonverbal side of it. So a big part of your communication in a dialogue with someone is actually the part which is not spoken, is the nonverbal engagement that you have with someone. And when you're facing in the same table, face to face in person, there is a lot of that nonverbal that's, wanting it or not, increases the time that you spend with that person to say goodbye or to wrap up the meeting, or so all of that in the Microsoft Teams or in Zoom, it's actually decreased. We not even notice it because it's such a micro side of it, but it decreases the time that you're in a meeting and allows you to easily wrap up, because everyone, and this is something, there are two things that everyone says in the last year, which is, can you hear me?
absolutely. I agree with you.
In the beginning, can you hear me? Obviously in the middle also sometimes, and then in the end usually is, well, thank you, it was great, I need to finish because I already have another call. Because
yes.
you complement your agenda and you become a little bit more productive, because there are a lot of things that are not there anymore. You don't have anyone knocking at your office door. You don't have anyone coming to ask if you want to go for coffee, or for the people who smoke for a smoke, or just for a quick chat. So there are a lot of components that we not even think on a daily basis, because they were so small, but they took as a whole a large percentage of your time. It doesn't mean that you were being less productive because you're communicating with people. That's not the case. But if you look at hard analysis data,
Yeah.
you're more productive in this way.
No, you are. Okay, with that, you have rightly said that, the most heard word, what we have heard is, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? And all those things. But when we are talking about, the productivity and the working morale, what we have seen even within our organization, when we were working together, because when we are working physically, we just pick up a phone and talk to our colleagues and all. But what we have seen is many companies, they schedule more meetings, they schedule more documentation to make workers accountable. While all this is very well intended, these efforts somehow also reduce the output. So, how do you think? Because what happens is, we are losing the flexible working and remote working. So we are somehow, combining both the things, and there is a gist where, where the accountability is somewhere lost in between, because we think that we are remotely working, it means that we are flexible working, but whereas, so according to you being a, extremely senior role as a CEO for outsourcing and permanent placement, what are the ways you feel that we can increase accountability?
Well, to answer that question, I would break it down into two ways.
Yeah.
Is the fact that you mentioned that more meetings are arranged, more things are to be filled. Not necessarily, because if your company moved in the way to enhance, again, automation and technology are keywords.
Yeah.
They're not keywords because of the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, actually, McKinsey has an interesting study about that. They realized that pre-pandemic, 30% of the roles in 8 countries, which actually corresponds to 62% of the global GDP and half of the population, should have been already working from home, should have been automated. So automation is not something because of the pandemic. It's a consequence that was maybe speed up a little bit because of the pandemic, but it's something that was already ongoing, something that was already moving. We would be living this that we are now, regardless of COVID or not. That's my opinion, at least. So, first point, automation and technology are fundamental to take away some of those extra meetings that need to happen to make people accountable. Because if you have the correct tools with the correct compliance in the correct process that you define as a company to move forward and to help people to be more productive when they're working from home, because it's our responsibility to give the tools to our staff to be able to be more productive and to be able to work better. So as soon as we have that responsibility and you move forward with it, it goes to the second point, which is directly connected with the understanding of accountability, which is people need to know the whys. A lot of times you have someone in your staff that is given a task and is going to do it, but has no perception of why is it doing it, or what is the impact if it's not done, or what is the impact if it gets delayed. One of the most important things in my perspective is accountability is directly connected with the knowledge of why you're doing what you need to do. So again, setting up expectations to remote workforce is extremely important. Explaining the why behind it and having definitive open lines of communication. All of this translated with a positive culture will increase the accountability because everyone feels more accountable and more a part of the company, or sometimes a part of being part of a larger family, which is the place that you work because you spend so many hours there.
Absolutely.
Have this positive culture where you do what you do and you know why you do it, and someone trusts that you're doing it. So that for me is extremely important. Then there are small bits here and there that you can include to increase the accountability, to increase the overall well-being of your staff through soft teams, for instance. And all of them together pretty much are a whole that will help people be more accountable to their roles, in my opinion.
Interesting. Do you think we have, we know that leadership is a leadership, whether we work remotely or whether we in person. In your, do you think that we as leaders, we need a different set of skills to get our point across when we are working remotely? Or if there is a, your personal case study, which you can share with us, shortly, briefly?
That is a really interesting question, actually, because myself, I thought about it when we started in a more proactive approach by working remotely. Do I need to change the way that I engage with my team? Do I need to be more A or more B? And the fact is, for me, the answer was no. I don't actually believe that as leaders you necessarily need to change your behavior to better engage with your people. Because if you are a good leader, most of the skills that are needed to lead through remote working, they were also needed to lead when you're face to face. Actually, some of them enhanced, again, trust, keywords in this conversation of ours, but it is quite important, trust. If you are a leader and you don't trust your people, you need to look inside or within yourself and trying to understand why you don't trust. Is it your structure or is it you?
Is it? I agree with
personal. When you say personal case study, I will. Not sure if I'm looking too much inside, but I'm actually quite proud of what us Dulsco did throughout the pandemic. And for me, it's an interesting case study because it's an 85-year-old company. He had in some way, some of the strategy was more, behind his time.
I think there's a certain legacy when you're talking about 85 years, definitely there's a certain legacy which you are living with. So yeah.
Absolutely. There are a lot of processes that were
Yes.
the process. So I'm extremely proud, and I would use this as a personal case study for this conversation, which is from as soon as the pandemic started, we proactively worked on business continuity plans. The leadership team had action COVID groups on a daily basis at 8:30 a.m. to understand almost on a day-to-day basis what to change. And we have roughly 14,000 people, which is our staff, and we have 400 core staff from 60 different nationalities. We placed all of those 400 people in one moment to the other almost, with new technology at their service, enhancing the process that we had and be able to cut the waste of the process. You know, if we think about Lean Six Sigma, we need to we need to remove some of that waste. So we did. We enhanced our processes, improved our process by giving more productivity to these people, and we shifted pretty much almost everyone to a remote working.
Wow.
And some of the cases that were just not possible to work remotely, we transformed in shift patterns for people to be able to be protected with the social distancing. So I would say that it is an interesting personal case study, because Dulsco as a company was not a tech-savvy company. You know, we were not extremely advanced in time or digital savvy on that and we changed it. So I think that's
really commendable. That's really commendable. So we'll wrap up the today's discussion. Just before wrapping up, I would like to give ask you, what is the advice you would like to give to your peers, especially who are in a leadership role and who are managing huge teams like yourself, a team of 1,100 people and much more or less. So what is one advice? How do you one is keeping in mind your organizational goals, which you have to achieve. Another thing is you also have to look into the emotional well-being of your employees, their the organization culture, their reliability on the organization. So one message which you would like to give to our audience.
Absolutely. We have a purpose at Dulsco, which is being better today than we were yesterday. I think that translates what I would give as a final message to my colleagues, which is, it's not showing weakness to ask our staff and our people, how are they feeling? Because we're in different moments. I think that being better today than we were yesterday translates not only in increased productivity, but it also translates in increased emotional intelligence, which is being closer to your people and understanding their day-to-day issues as they will understand yours, brings everyone's closer, and at the end of the day, in a more productive way. Because if you're happy in your role and if you like where you work, you will be more productive.
I agree with you. Yes, very true. As Marshall Goldsmith will close this discussion with his quote, what get us here won't get us there. So, it's absolutely right. So thank you very much for joining us today. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on screen as well as off screen. Thank you, Tiago, and have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.